They were the perfect neighbors. Young, helpful, always offering to run errands for the elderly folks next door. For 18 months, Jake and Emma made me feel cared for while systematically stealing my identity, my savings, and my dignity. I'm Margaret, and this is how my helpful neighbors became my financial predators. I'm sitting in Detective Rodriguez's office, staring at bank statements that show I've been robbed of $180,000 over the past year and a half. The numbers don't make sense, the transactions don't look familiar, and the signatures on the withdrawal slips aren't quite mine. But what hurts most isn't the money. It's the realization that the two people I trusted most were the ones stealing from me while making me feel like a burden they graciously carried. Mrs. Thompson, we believe your neighbors Jake and Emma Morrison have been systematically defrauding you, Detective Rodriguez explains gently. They've been using a combination of identity theft, financial manipulation, and what we call elder condescension fraud to access your accounts. Elder condescension fraud. There's a name for what they did to me. There's a name for making a 78-year-old woman feel too stupid, too old, and too helpless to manage her own life while stealing everything she worked 40 years to save. But let me take you back to where this betrayal began, because every predator starts by making their victim feel grateful for the hunting. It was September 2021 when Jake and Emma Morrison moved into the house next door to my suburban Phoenix home. I'd lived in the same neighborhood for 35 years, watching families come and go. But these two stood out immediately. They were young, maybe early 30s, attractive, professional, and incredibly friendly. "Hi there." "You must be Mrs. Thompson," Emma said the day they moved in, appearing at my front door with a plate of homemade cookies. "We're your new neighbors, Jake and Emma. We're so excited to be living next to someone with so much experience in the neighborhood." She was charming, well-spoken, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. Jake appeared shortly after, offering to help with my groceries that I was struggling to carry from my car. "Please, let me get those," he said, taking the heavy bags with ease. "You shouldn't be carrying all this stuff by yourself. What if you fall?" It was a simple gesture, but it planted the first seed of the narrative that would eventually destroy me, that I was helpless, fragile, and in need of their protection. Over the first month, Jake and Emma established themselves as the perfect neighbors. They brought in my mail when I was away, helped with yard work I couldn't manage anymore, and always stopped to chat when they saw me outside. "How are you doing today, Mrs. Thompson?" Emma would ask with what seemed like genuine concern. "Are you managing okay? It must be hard being all alone in such a big house." I'd been widowed for 3 years, and while I was independent and capable, their attention made me feel less lonely. After decades of marriage, living alone was an adjustment, and having caring neighbors felt like a blessing. The first offer of help came when I mentioned struggling with my new smartphone. My granddaughter had insisted I upgrade from my old flip phone, but the technology was overwhelming. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson, these modern phones are so complicated," Emma said sympathetically. "Even young people have trouble with them. Would you like Jake to help you set it up? He's really good with technology." Jake spent an afternoon helping me with my phone, setting up apps, organizing my contacts, and showing me how to use the camera. He was patient and kind, never making me feel stupid for asking questions. "Don't worry about not understanding all this stuff," he said with a warm smile. "Technology changes so fast these days. It's not designed for people your age. You shouldn't have to deal with all these complications." What I didn't realize was that he'd also installed remote access software that would let him monitor my phone activity, read my texts, and access my banking apps. The second offer came when I mentioned having trouble with my home computer. Online banking was becoming necessary for everything, but I found the websites confusing and worried about making mistakes. "You know what, Mrs. Thompson? These banking websites are terrible," Emma said with feigned frustration. "They make everything so complicated on purpose. Would you like us to help you set up automatic bill payments? That way, you won't have to worry about navigating those awful websites." It seemed like a reasonable solution. I was spending hours each month trying to pay bills online, often making errors that required phone calls to fix. Having Jake and Emma handle the technical stuff would save me stress and time. Jake came over with his laptop and helped me set up automatic payments for my utilities, mortgage, and credit cards. He was efficient and professional, explaining each step while I watched. See how they make everything so complicated? He said, pointing at the screen. All these passwords and security questions, they assume everyone grew up with computers. It's really not fair to people your age. What I didn't know was that he was also setting up access to my accounts for himself, creating a parallel banking profile that would let him transfer money without my knowledge. The third phase was the most insidious, convincing me that I was becoming forgetful and confused. It started with small observations about my behavior that seemed caring but were actually gaslighting. "Mrs. Thompson, did you remember to lock your front door?" Emma would ask when she saw me returning from errands. "I noticed it was open earlier. You might want to be more careful about that. Are you sure you paid your electric bill?" Jake would mention casually. "I saw a past due notice in your mailbox. These companies can be so aggressive with their billing. You left your car running in the driveway yesterday," Emma would say with concern. "That could be dangerous. Maybe it's time to think about limiting your driving." Each observation made me question my memory and competence. Was I becoming forgetful? Was I making dangerous mistakes? Their constant monitoring of my activities, framed as neighborly concern, made me feel like I was losing my mind. "Don't be embarrassed about needing help," Emma would say when I expressed frustration about forgetting things. "Everyone your age goes through this. The important thing is having people who care about you and can step in when needed." By month 6, I was completely dependent on Jake and Emma for anything involving technology, finances, or complex decision-making. They had successfully convinced me that I was too old, too confused, and too fragile to manage my own life. "Let us handle all the complicated stuff," Jake would say whenever I mentioned a financial concern. "You've earned the right to relax and not worry about all these modern hassles." The fourth phase was direct access to my money. It began with small requests that seemed reasonable and temporary. "Mrs. Thompson, your automatic payment for the electric bill didn't go through," Emma would say, showing me an official-looking notice. The bank probably flagged it as suspicious because of some security update. "Can we use our account to pay it this month and you can reimburse us?" I would write them a check for the amount, grateful that they were preventing my electricity from being shut off due to some banking error I didn't understand. "Your pharmacy called about your prescription," Jake would mention. "They said your insurance information needs updating, but their computer system is down. They can process it manually if we pay cash, and you can sort out the insurance reimbursement later." Another check, another grateful thank you for handling a complicated situation that was beyond my understanding. "The city sent a notice about property tax reassessment," Emma would explain, showing me official-looking documents. "You need to respond within 48 hours or face penalties. The online system is down, but we can drive to City Hall and handle it for you." More money, more gratitude, more dependency on their help with systems that seemed designed to confuse and intimidate elderly people. By month 12, I was writing Jake and Emma checks almost weekly for various emergencies, bills, and bureaucratic complications that they handled on my behalf. Each transaction was documented, explained, and framed as protecting me from the complexities of modern life. "You're so lucky to have us next door," Emma would say when I thanked them for their help. "Most elderly people don't have anyone to protect them from all these scams and complications. We make sure no one takes advantage of you." The fifth phase was the most sophisticated. Jake and Emma convinced me to give them power of attorney for financial matters. They framed it as protection against the very crime they were committing. "Mrs. Thompson, we've been reading about elder financial abuse," Jake said one evening, showing me newspaper articles about seniors being scammed. It's becoming really common. Criminals target people your age because they assume you don't understand modern banking. The best protection is to have trusted people who can monitor your accounts and catch suspicious activity," Emma added. "If you give us limited power of attorney, we can watch for fraud and stop it before you lose money." The documents looked official and professional. They explained that power of attorney would only be used to protect my accounts, not to access money for their benefit. "Think of us as your financial security guards," Jake said with a reassuring smile. "We'll make sure no one can take advantage of your trusting nature." I signed the papers, grateful to have such caring neighbors protecting me from financial predators. I had no idea I was signing away my money to the very people I was trying to protect myself from. With power of attorney, Jake and Emma's theft became systematic and sophisticated. They created a parallel financial life for me, with accounts I didn't know about and transactions I never authorized. "We moved some of your money to higher interest accounts," Emma would explain when I noticed changes in my bank statements. "The bank recommended it as a way to maximize your retirement income. We consolidated some of your old accounts to simplify your finances," Jake would say when I asked about missing funds. "Everything is still there, just organized better for tax purposes. We set up an emergency fund in case you need immediate access to cash," Emma would add when questioned about transfers. "It's earning better interest than your regular checking account." Every explanation sounded reasonable and was delivered with the condescending patience used for someone who couldn't possibly understand financial complexities. The sixth phase was isolation. As I became more dependent on Jake and Emma, they gradually convinced me that other people in my life were problems to be avoided. "Your granddaughter seems very demanding," Emma observed after overhearing a phone conversation. "She's always asking you for things. Maybe you should set some boundaries with her." "That friend from church calls you a lot," Jake mentioned. "She sounds lonely and might be trying to take advantage of your generosity. Some people target widows for their kindness. Your son seems stressed about his own finances," Emma would say after he visited. "You don't want to burden him with your concerns. It's better to handle your affairs privately." They convinced me that my family and friends were either potential threats or people I should protect from my problems. Jake and Emma became my only trusted advisors, the only people who understood my needs. The beginning of the end came when my granddaughter Jenny visited unexpectedly. She was home from college for spring break and wanted to spend time with me. During her visit, she noticed changes in my behavior and my house. "Grandma, why do you have Jake and Emma's phone number written next to your bed?" she asked. "And why are there so many checks made out to them in your checkbook?" I explained that they were helping me with various bills and complicated financial matters because I was having trouble managing everything myself. "But, Grandma, you used to do all your own banking," Jenny said with concern. "You taught me how to balance a checkbook. Why would you suddenly need help with money management?" Her questions made me realize that I couldn't clearly explain where my money was going, or why I needed so much help with tasks I'd handled independently for decades. "Can we look at your bank statements together?" Jenny asked. "I want to make sure everything looks right." When we reviewed my finances, Jenny immediately spotted irregularities that I'd been trained to ignore. Large transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, automatic payments to companies I'd never heard of, and a steady drain of funds that didn't correspond to my normal expenses. "Grandma, someone has been stealing from you," Jenny said with alarm. "These transactions don't make sense. You need to call the bank immediately." But I'd been so thoroughly conditioned to trust Jake and Emma that I defended them even when presented with evidence of theft. "They're just helping me organize my finances," I insisted. "Everything they do is to protect me from fraud and complications." "Grandma, they are the fraud," Jenny said gently. "You're being scammed by your own neighbors." Jenny insisted we go to the bank together to review my accounts. What the bank manager showed us was devastating. Over the past year, $180,000 had been transferred out of my accounts through a combination of authorized and unauthorized transactions. Mrs. Thompson, these signatures on the withdrawal slips don't match your signature card, the manager explained. Someone has been forging your name to access your funds. The power of attorney documents that Jake and Emma had convinced me to sign gave them broad access to my accounts, but they'd exceeded even those permissions with outright forgery and identity theft. This is a clear case of elder financial abuse, the manager said. We need to freeze your accounts and contact the authorities immediately. That's how I ended up in Detective Rodriguez's office, learning that my helpful neighbors were actually sophisticated financial predators who specialized in targeting elderly people through elaborate confidence schemes. Jake and Emma Morrison aren't their real names, Detective Rodriguez explained. They're part of a network that moves into neighborhoods specifically to target vulnerable seniors. They establish trust, create dependency, then systematically drain their victims' assets. The investigation revealed that Jake and Emma had operated similar schemes in 3 other states, always targeting elderly people living alone. They would rent houses in middle-class neighborhoods, identify the most isolated seniors, then spend months building trust before beginning the theft. Their method is psychological manipulation combined with ageism, the detective explained. They convince elderly victims that they're too old, too confused, and too vulnerable to manage their own affairs. Then they position themselves as the solution to problems they've created. The fake emergencies, the complicated technology, the confusing bureaucracy, most of it was fabricated to make me feel helpless and grateful for their intervention. They study their victims carefully, Detective Rodriguez continued. They learn your routines, your fears, your family relationships. Then they exploit all of that information to control and rob you. The psychological manipulation had been as devastating as the financial theft. For 18 months, Jake and Emma had systematically destroyed my confidence in my own competence while stealing my life savings. The cruelest part is how they make victims grateful for being robbed, the detective said. You actually thank them for destroying your financial security. Jake and Emma disappeared before they could be arrested. They'd liquidated my stolen money and vanished, leaving behind a rented house and fake identities. The investigation revealed they were already setting up their next operation in a retirement community in Nevada. Recovery of my money was impossible. The funds had been transferred through multiple accounts and eventually converted to cryptocurrency before being moved offshore. My $180,000 was gone forever. The psychological recovery has been even more difficult than the financial loss. I'm in therapy, learning to distinguish between genuine help and manipulative control, between aging naturally and being deliberately undermined. Elder abuse often involves making victims doubt their own competence, my therapist explained. The abusers convince seniors that they need protection, then become the very threat they claim to prevent. I've learned that ageism is a powerful weapon in the hands of criminals. Society already expects elderly people to be confused, helpless, and vulnerable. Predators exploit these stereotypes to justify their control and theft. The most devastating realization was how eager I'd been to believe I was becoming incompetent. When Jake and Emma suggested I was too old to understand technology or manage finances, I accepted their assessment instead of questioning their motives. You weren't losing your mind, my therapist said. You were being systematically gaslighted by people who made money from your self-doubt. I spent the past year rebuilding my confidence and my financial security. I've learned to use technology independently, manage my own banking, and trust my own judgment. Most importantly, I've learned to recognize the difference between genuine help and manipulative control. My message to other elderly people is this: don't let anyone convince you that age makes you incompetent. Real help empowers you to maintain independence. Fake help creates dependency that benefits the helper more than you. If someone insists on handling your affairs because you're too old to understand, question their motives. If someone constantly points out your mistakes while offering to fix them, consider whether they might be creating the problems they claim to solve. Jake and Emma stole $180,000 from me, but they also stole 18 months of my dignity and independence. Don't let helpful neighbors become scheming predators. Sometimes the people offering to protect you are the ones you need protection from. Trust your instincts, maintain your independence, and remember that growing older doesn't make you stupid, but trusting the wrong people certainly can make you poor.